James, my goal for the day is not only to speak about your football career, but also to get to know you as a person. And in my opinion, to get to know someone deeply, you have to understand a bit about their childhood. You know, so let's talk about your first 10 years of life. How was your childhood?
Um, it was beautiful, to be honest. 'Cause I had an amazing mother, but it was difficult in hindsight. But it was nice. So I didn't grow up with my dad. He left kind of before I was born, and so I had two older sisters. So my mum, it wasn't always an easy situation for my mum. But what she did a really good job of was she filled the household full of love, kind of thing. So. And she was an amazing mum and did a really good job because she had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a newborn, and didn't have too much money at the time. So we grew up in simple circumstances, I would say. Although you're in Australia, so quality of life is still good, but we didn't have too much money, and it wasn't always easy for her. Although we, as youngsters, me and my sisters, we didn't necessarily realize it because obviously young, and
Sure.
our mum did a good job of just making sure life was still good and we were all still happy, and kind of filled that household with love. So I would say first 10 years was a nice 10 years because we had an amazing mother.
When did you stop playing football, and when did you realize, hey, I'm pretty good at it, and I could make a living from it?
So in Australia, obviously you've got a lot of different sports, and my mum, and I was just a very active kid, so my mum threw me into football, soccer in Australia at the time. We called it, but football, at the age of 3 or 4. And just because I was sporty, I was generally good at whatever I did, and I just loved sport and wanted to play sport. And I think when I was about 8, I realised that at that time we probably didn't have a lot of money, and I remember asking my coach at the time if he thinks I could play for Australia, and he said I could. And so I remember at 8 years old, I ran home to my mum and I said, I'm going to play for Australia and I'll buy you a house one day. So that was something I said at a young age. Obviously, you're naive, so you believe anything your head coach says.
Yes.
But I decided pretty young that was what I wanted to do. Yeah.
That's really interesting for me, because most of the time when I speak with football players, there has to be also other sports. There has to be a bigger purpose. And it's really interesting that you say, okay, for you it was giving your mom a better life, also when it comes to the financial part, of course. So do you think that was also crucial for you to say, okay, I really wanna be able to pay the price, and be willing to pay the price, because I just want to do it also for my mom?
Absolutely. I think firstly I was generally competitive, and that I had that by nature, but it was also growing up in the circumstance we grew up in. I realized pretty quickly I didn't want that to be our forever, and not just my forever, but our forever, because obviously I was very family orientated, and especially my mum. She was an amazing person. She sacrificed everything for us. So, and we were always we were renting everywhere. We were moving houses a lot, and for me it was just a no-brainer. It was something I didn't even think twice about. It was okay. I'll go this way. I'll succeed at this, and I'll be able to look after my mum and my sisters at the time. I was obviously, but my mum was the forefront at that time. So that was definitely my drive, 100%. But there was also a part of me that whatever I did, I wanted to do well at as well. That was also inside of me, and I was just a very competitive person by nature. Okay. Definitely.
Interesting. So you moved to a football academy then in Australia, right? Or was it your first club, or was the first club like a smaller club?
Yeah, so Australia, I mean, you can't really compare it to anything else, especially at that time. It was difficult. That you had kind of small academies, but not great ones. Okay. At a young age, I decided to go to Sydney to play in Sydney. So that was long days. As a 13-year-old, I'd be going to school. I'd be waking up. I think I used to train at 5 o'clock in the morning by myself. Then I'd go to school at 8 o'clock, and then I'd leave school at 3 o'clock. I'd travel an hour and a half to Sydney. I'd train, travel an hour and a half back, eat dinner in the car, and I'd get home at like 10:30, 11 at night. And that was my day. That was my day normally. It's like 4 times a week. And then on the weekends, we'd play in Sydney as well. But the academies weren't great. They were... they weren't structured very well. I've got to be careful what I say here, but the coaching wasn't necessarily at a level that was fantastic. And obviously, as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, that was a lot. That was pretty heavy program. But what it did teach me is hard work and resilience. It didn't necessarily give me that great foundation as a footballer, technically or whatever, but it taught me that I had to work hard if I wanted to achieve what I wanted to achieve.
Yes.
So.
And then in 2009, you left your country and moved to Europe and to Alkmaar, where we have a really, really high quality tactical football. How was the time for you?
It was a little bit difficult because if you backtrack a little bit, I had a pretty successful period first in Australia where I was as captain of the under-20s national team. I went to the Olympics in 2008. I made my debut for the national team, and I won the championship in Australia. And then I went to Holland. So I kind of burst onto the scene a little bit in Australia, did really well for an 8-month, 10-month period. And then I went to Holland. So I was a kind of like a big fish in a small sea in Australia, and then all of a sudden I was a small fish in a big sea in Holland, in Europe, and especially Alkmaar at that time. Louis van Gaal was coach. They had, 3 of the Dutch national team midfielders were in the team, and it was, again, that was a really good experience. I was nowhere near good enough, but I remember my agent called me and said, after 2 years of not playing, said, I've got an opportunity in Australia, and I kind of said to him, if you call me again, you won't be my agent, because I have a 4-year contract and I'm going to do everything I can to make it here, and otherwise I'll come home when the contract's over, but there's no chance of me giving up. So that was kind of like my apprenticeship and taught me that resilience thing, which was really important in my career.
Yeah. You were already 20 when you moved to
I was just turned 19.
19.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's not that young when it comes to football, right? When we see, here in Europe in the football academies, the quality is just 10 out of 10. So I can imagine that it was quite hard, and you have to have a great mindset to always keep going and to say, okay, I will go this way, and then just try to be competitive with the other boys.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was the valuable lesson for me in that period, because I didn't always play. I always got really close, and then there was an injury, and then I had to I got close again, and then I was away with the national team. And it was kind of like, it made me realise, all right, also the competitiveness, because in Australia, if I was away and I'd come back, I'd play again. But in Holland, I was close. I went away and came back, and I was at the back of the line again. And that kind of just taught me about resilience, not giving up, keep working. And then in the end, I got an opportunity from there, but I didn't get an opportunity there. And that was just a really good lesson in hard work and resilience and all that kind of stuff.
And how was the time when it comes to your personal life? I mean, Europe is completely different than Australia. You were thousands of kilometers away from your family. How was the time for you when it comes to the mental part?
Difficult. I think I'm generally a really positive person, so I always try and see the positive things. And obviously as an 18, 19-year-old, you have that naiveness of like, this was always my dream. I'm going to go over there and just I'm living my dream. But obviously reality hits when you go over there. It's the middle of winter, because it was the 4th of January when I landed, middle of winter. Nobody knows you. You don't know the language. The younger kids in the team don't always accept you because you're taking their position. So there's a lot of stuff going on. You're away from family and friends. So there was definitely some ups and downs. But again, I was living my dream, so I never wanted to quit. But I wouldn't say it was definitely not a smooth ride. I mean, football's never a smooth ride.
Yeah. How often did you see your family in this time?
So at that time, my sisters came over a little bit, and they were coming in and checking in on me. One of my sisters stayed for a longer period of time, but I saw my mum maybe maximum once a year. So there was all that going on. But again, there's kind of that naiveness to it all, right? So you don't think twice, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely, like every footballer goes through, it's definitely not always easy for sure.
No, but it's really interesting for me, because I don't know, in my opinion, the people outside of football, they just see footballer in a wrong picture, to be honest. We always see the great lives with the good money, I don't know, the great lifestyle, but we don't really see how much they sacrificed in their childhood also, to move abroad thousands of kilometers away from your family. It is not easy, and that's all for a less than 1% chance to at the end of the day make it to a pro player, right? Yeah,
for sure. It's not easy, but that's why footballers do get paid well, and that's why it's not for everybody, because it's not easy. It's difficult because I'm really careful to place footballers in like that victim mindset a little bit to say, oh, poor us. But at the end of the day, everyone's human beings, right? Everyone's human beings. And regardless of what situation in your life, generally you all have difficult moments. You all go through difficult periods. Being away from home and all that kind of stuff, it's really, really difficult. What football's taught me, and I think a really cool tool, important tool for life in general for human beings, is perspective. And I think it's important to accept the difficulty in the moments, those kind of difficult moments, and work through the emotions and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's also important to bring perspective into it all and to say, okay, look, at that time, it's difficult. You know, I'm not playing. The people don't always accept me. I don't speak the language. I'm away from family and friends. But on the other side, I can say, well, hang on a minute. I'm living my dream. I'm earning good money. I'm experiencing a new culture. I'm learning a new language. So it's kind of like, I think you shouldn't ignore all the emotions. But I think it's not what's going on in life. It's kind of how you're looking at it. And I think that's where the tool of perspective is really, really important in life.
Mm-hmm. That's well said. That's well said. And that's also, you can also compare this in the normal life. You know, it's always that the perspective is really important in every area of your life. So your mindset is quite good. How did you work on that?
Look, to be honest, from a young age, I've been really... I think I had a vision board when I was the age of 16, you know, and I was very interested in, I got really heavily into Tony Robbins, like from a young age.
Really?
And I don't know why, for whatever reason, I was always really interested in mindset and interested in all that kind of thing. And my mum was a positive person, but she never pushed me in that direction. I didn't have any influences in my life where I would say that would push me in that direction. It was just kind of came from inside. So from a young age, I was always working on that. I also have had a life coach for a long time. I studied psychology and sociology at university. So I've done a lot of things along the way that have helped me be a lot more self-reflective, self-aware, also aware of all those kind of things in my surroundings. So that kind of mindset things have been a big part of life, and football and life in general, and amazing teachers. And I think if you're aware enough, you can take the cool lessons throughout all your journey to kind of help with your mindset along the way, if you know what I mean.
Do you think do you experience that also other football players they think the way you do, like trying to work also with personal development stuff, trying to work maybe with vision boards, to do also some life coaching things? Because in my opinion, it is really, really important also when it comes to football, to also grow in your personality.
I think it was taboo, and it's a lot less taboo now. So I think more and more players are getting into it, but I still think it's a small percentage of footballers. From my experiences, it's a lot more than it used to be. But I do have a lot of colleagues that do that kind of thing, like Haris Tabakovic. He's a good friend of mine. He was at Austria, now he's gone to Hoffenheim. He's someone that really focuses on that kind of thing, but it is still a small percentage, because I think in general in life, right, if you look at human beings in general, in society, to be self-reflective, to be self-aware, there's not a massive amount of people that, first of all, are aware enough to go in that direction, and secondly are probably brave enough to go in that direction, because it's actually a pretty scary thing to do all that kind of thing, because it can be confronting, it can be scary, it can be all of those things. So like in life and society, I think in football it's still a small percentage, although it's becoming less and less taboo, so it's becoming more accepted.
Yeah. But how would you rate the importance of it?
I think it's massively important. I think regardless of football, I think it's just massively important in life to understand yourself, to understand your strengths and your weaknesses, to understand how you tick and react in certain situations. And it also helps you understand other people and understand, and also be empathetic in situations and all that kind of stuff. I think it's to live a happy life and to be successful and to have successful relationships. I think it's really important.
What was on your vision board of 16?
Oh man, I think I had Manchester United, Champions League final, all that kind of stuff, to buy a house and I'd dream big. That was my philosophy.
To be honest, I have so much respect of that, because with 16, and I think it's quite, I don't know how it is in Australia, but in Europe it's quite normal, you go into the school, and in my opinion you get a bit of the wrong mindset, failure is wrong, for example. And when it comes to me, with 16 I had not that mindset you had, to be honest, really?
Again, I think it was a product of my upbringing. I think just growing up in circumstances where I saw everyone else around me kind of had a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I guess that was a little bit of the inferiority thing. I think, okay. And also, and I wanted more for me and for my family. And I had from a really young age, not in an arrogant way, but this belief that I was where I was, but I was never going to end up where I was, if you know what I mean. I always had this feeling I could be someone and I could do something and I can achieve something special. And I just have this naiveness about it all, if you know what I mean. As you do when you're young, you believe in it and then you go for it. And growing up where I grew up, you know, it's a small beach town, you know, you come into contact with alcohol and drugs and parties at a really young age. And I came into contact with that at a really young age. And I was starting to go in the wrong direction, and then I realized, and then it affected my football 2 weeks in a row. I didn't finish the runs I was supposed to finish, and then my mum kind of said to me, "Well, look, if you don't want to do it, don't do it." And then I had to make a choice, and in that moment, I said, "All right, I want to do it." And so that was also just realizing I really, really wanted this, if you know what I mean, and realizing that at a really young age. And that was always, I always had these influences next to me, but my mindset was always, I can watch that and I can enjoy that, but this is where I want to be. And to be there, I have to work hard. I have to be positive. I have to think big and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
What is your advice to, I don't know, some 15-year-old academy player at Austria when it comes especially to the mental part of football?
It's interesting because I'm helping out at the moment with the under 16, so I'm dealing with a lot of 15 at the Academy of Austria. My advice, as basic as it sounds, hard work and resilience are two big things that I've kind of taken with me throughout my career. And I often see, like you talked about it now, you just touched on it now, you and I, examples of growing up in a certain environment. And I feel like at that age, it's really crucial. At that age, you want to be cool, you're a teenager, you want to fit in and everyone wants to connect and all that kind of stuff. But you've got to make a decision. Do I want to be cool? Do I want to achieve something? And I think at that age, you have the wrong mindset of or idea of what cool is. You think cool is not trying hard or not doing what the coach says or, you know, being nonchalant about things. But as you get older, you realize cool is working hard, is giving it your all, is being a professional and all that kind of thing. And that is going your own way. If you need to go on your own way, if it means achieving your goals. And I think that's a really, really important learning moment at that age, okay, and to decide which direction am I going, which cool do I want to be.
Interesting. Cristiano Ronaldo said in an interview that you cannot compare the academy players 10 years ago with the academy players right now because the mindset is just different. He mentioned that they are not willing to pay the price anymore. Do you have the same feeling?
I don't know if they're not willing. I think it's where have I seen it? I saw something somewhere. I think it was, how do you create hunger in paradise, right? And I think these days, the academy players, they get everything they need, so they've kind of got this paradise, right? And the question is, how do you create that hunger? And that's a difficult,
interesting.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, right? And it's difficult for a coach, and it's difficult. I mean, and Ronaldo, he had to work hard. He came from nothing, you know, he had to work hard to get where he was, and that was just instilled in him. And, you know, we have difficult situations, and academy players now, they kind of get picked up, they get taken to training, they get taken to school, they get taken home, they get fed. You kind of got it all on a platter at a young age. And then it's the question is, okay, as a club or a coach, how do I still create that hunger in paradise? Because effectively they've got all they need. So it's a hard one, because you also got to think, okay, if I'm a 16-year-old and 15-year-old, how am I going to react in that situation? And it's easy for us to say, yeah, I would have worked hard, but we didn't grow up in that situation, right? So I think Ronaldo, what he says makes sense, but then you've got to kind of go, okay, well, how can we as mentors, as coaches, as you know, life coaches or whatever, or as a club, how can we create that hunger? How can we, you know what I mean?
The hunger in paradise. Really interesting, because that's exactly what he said. You know, he also mentioned his son. He said, like, he had never sacrificed in his entire life.
Yeah.
You know, never. So it will be really hard for him to say, okay, I'm gonna do this extra work. Why should he? He has everything, you know. And that's I have to think about it, because that's really interesting what you say with this how to create hunger in paradise.
And I think it's easy for us to sit here like Ronaldo and say they're never going to strive. Of course they're not, because they're growing up in this easier environment. So then it's up to us to say, okay, how do we create that? How do we create resilience? How do we create a growth mindset? How do we promote that? How do we create hunger? I think that's then on us, because children are children, teenagers are teenagers, right? That's not their responsibility, you know?
Totally.
So then I think it's left on us to say, okay, how do we do that? How can we affect that?
I totally agree on that. And I also agree with you that I think that the mental part is just one of the most important things when it comes to young football players, but also, you know, pro players. But I also do have the feeling that everything is on the highest standard, like athletic coaches, individual coaches, nutrition. But when it comes to the mental part, I mean, it's getting better, yes, but it is not 10 out of 10 when you see the football academies. Why do you think this is still the case?
Firstly, I totally agree with you. And I think, well, I can use Austria as an example. I'll use Austrian football as an example because we're here. I think if a club says, okay, we have this budget and we need to achieve all of these things, what's at the top of the list and what's at the bottom of the list? And the reality is probably that's going to come somewhere down the bottom. And because most clubs don't have like a Red Bull, an amount of money that they, you know, an endless amount of money kind of thing. And I think, unfortunately, that side of the game is the one that, at the end of the day, lands somewhere down the bottom. And I 100% agree that's also the side of the game where I see the most potential. And I think in the next 10 years that will be unlocked, although it's happening now, but more and more and more and more. But that's why I think it's not at the top of the list. I think that's more of a money thing and people not appreciating and realize how important that actually is.
It is, of course, it is a money thing, but they also spend a lot of money on nutrition coaches, for example, or I don't know, physios or so. I think when they would realize that also injuries can come from mental illness, for example, then they would see this picture different, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think it's really important, and I think it's just as important as everything else. And I'm 100% sure in the future that will become more and more of a norm in hopefully all football clubs within the world. But at the moment, that's unfortunately, I think, from my experiences and from what I've seen, not at the top of the list.
Right. Let's come back to your time in the Netherlands. How did you deal with this pressure there? Because, you know, it's you mentioned Louis van Gaal was the coach there, right? So you have a lot of pressure to perform every single day. How did you deal with that in such a young age? Yeah,
it's funny with Louis van Gaal. I think after being there for 4 days, he brought me into his office, and the first thing he said to me was, "You're not good enough."
Really?
Like, okay. I was like, okay. And then he said, "You're tactically not good enough, and you're too old. You're too old to learn." And I was kind of said, "Oh, I'm only 19. You know, I just turned 19." And he was the opinion I wasn't good enough and I was too old to learn. So that was the first thing he said to me. So as a 19-year-old, but I think regardless of everything that was going on, I think the biggest pressure I had was the pressure I had on myself. And I put on myself, and I actually at that age I used to get really ashamed, and I didn't want to. Whenever my friends and family would call, I actually didn't want to talk about my football. I didn't want to talk about myself. And in hindsight, that's a shame because, for instance, my mum, or she doesn't care how successful I am. She just wants to know how my life is and how I'm going. But I was too ashamed at the time to talk about it. And I think that's what most footballers do, especially at a young age. You identify yourself purely as a footballer. And if that's not going well, you're a nobody as a human being, right? And that's that period. Of course, everything that's going on is pressure, but it's the internal pressure you're putting on yourself. And that was a difficult process for me, for sure.
Yeah. You mentioned a really, really crucial point, in my opinion. You said that as a young football player, you identify yourself only with football. And I think that's really, really dangerous, because I think that the ultimate goal is also, okay, you are James Holland, a football player, but you're also James Holland as a person. You have your own personality. Why do you think it is the case that all of the young football players, they just identify their self-esteem, for example, with football?
I think, to be honest, I don't think it's just a young footballer thing. I think it's a footballer thing in general. And you see that when players retire from football as well. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're professional at something, you give your whole life to it, right? And that's, you get recognition, you get you've got the fans, you're playing in front of people every week. It's all you ever known, and it's all you've ever done, and you've given your whole life to it. And it's a very selfish pursuit to be, a professional at that level. And so that's kind of, I think it's easy to do, to say, okay, this is my whole life. And then you forget about, okay, I'm James Holland, the human being. And that's a part of my life, a big part of my life, but it's just a part of my life, and it's not who I am. And I think it goes back to, you asked me, do a lot of footballers, do they work on themselves? Do they do that kind of stuff? I think if footballers don't go in that direction to work on themselves and to actually build the mental capacity and tools to deal with it all in a healthy way, I think that's easy then to stay there and say, okay, I'm James Holland, the footballer, and that's it. And I think that's the mistake a lot of footballers, a lot of athletes make in general.
But James, just imagine you play football and you end your career with, 35, okay? And the only thing you ever thought is like, I'm James Holland, the football player, or I'm a normal football player in the German Bundesliga, and I only identify myself with the football player. Isn't it really, really dangerous after your career?
It's, first of all, I am 35. I did just finish my career, so I'm in a similar situation. It's massively dangerous. It's why a lot of footballers go into depression when they retire, lose all their money, start drinking heavily. Like they go down the wrong route because of that. Absolutely, it's can be detrimental to your mental state. 100%, and mental health for sure.
Do you think, you work on your mental health every single day, how it sounds, but do you also have some issues right now with that?
It's definitely not a comfortable period for sure. It's been a really uncomfortable period for me. I think I made the decision throughout last season. I was having a bit of a difficult time sometimes with the coach, and it wasn't always an easy situation. And I kind of said, okay, I should start thinking about retirement. But if I do retire, I'm in a foreign country. I don't have my friends and family around. I don't have a family at home. I'm single, so I need to. I don't want to just retire and then go to nothing. So I need to set myself up. So I started to ask around about potential opportunities, and I found a really good opportunity. And so I planned my whole life, and I communicated to the club, okay, I'm going to retire. And at that time they said I could have still played another year, but the opportunity was really good. And so I was aware, okay, I needed to set my life up so I didn't just have nothing. And then come June, when I was supposed to make the move, I didn't get the working visa in where I was supposed to go. And all of a sudden I was left there with nothing. So I kind of had exactly what I was trying to stop, I ended up with. And that leaves you in a difficult situation because, again, although I work on my mental health, it's still not easy. You're in a foreign country, you're not by yourself. You'd planned your whole life in a different direction, and all of a sudden, you lose it all. So it's definitely, like, my period right now has been a really, really uncomfortable one. But I try to make sure I do certain things to make sure I do stay in a healthy and good mindset. And although I'm not satisfied and happy with my current situation, I know what I need to do to keep myself in a healthy mindset, and to also understand, okay, this is just a phase and it will pass and I will be okay. You know what I mean?
Really interesting. And that's another point why I think the mental part for footballers is even more important than for normal people, because normal people, they sign 1, 2 or 3 working contracts in their life, to have. They are able to plan much more than football players do, You guys, of course, you earn good money, but it's for 2 or 3 years, and there's a lot of insecurity going around. So again, huge respect, because I don't think that I would be able to handle this kind of situation the way you do, to be honest.
I'm sure you would. But again, I think that's also where that tool of perspective, I think, is really important, right? So you can sit there and I can say, I didn't get a dream job that I thought I was going to get. I'm not playing football anymore and everyone's playing. I don't have the community of footballers every day in a change room that I used to normally have. And, I've got nothing going for me at the moment. Or I can sit there and say, I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm young. I live in a beautiful city in Vienna. The sun's shining every day. And I don't have too many responsibilities right now. so I can just kind of enjoy my life, right? And so I think it depends how you look at it. And I definitely have my bad days, and to be honest, the last kind of 2 weeks has been a bit more of a difficult period for me. But I think having those tools you can use, and using the perspective and understanding that it's just a phase and it's going to be okay and it's going to pass. I think that's like a really important part of getting through those difficult periods, because everyone goes through difficult periods if you're a footballer or a human being in general.
Thanks for your honesty, by the way. I think it's really important to find the right balance between being thankful on the one hand, of course, but also never being satisfied, okay? Because as you mentioned before, you have your dream job, you was possible to make your hobby to your job, but on the other hand, never being satisfied. Do you also think that's a hard balance to find as a football player? Because once you stop increasing your performance, it will be super tough as a football player. But on the other hand, you should always be thankful, right?
Absolutely. And I think like to be happy but not always satisfied, it's a good balance to have. But on the other side, I think that not being satisfied thing is a bit of a double-edged sword. I think on one side it pushes you, and that's why you can be a professional, and that's why every day as an athlete or a professional or whatever you're doing, your goal is to go in, push yourself, find your edge at whatever it is, physical, tactical, technical, and push that edge to the back. So every day you're going to your edge. Every day you're trying to push that edge back and further back and further back and further back. But if you're doing that in life everywhere and always and continuously, and you're never satisfied, that's also tiring. It's also difficult for people in your life. Like it's a hard thing, because that's how we're wired as well. So, and also sometimes I sit there and I think, I was actually FaceTiming my little nephew this morning, and he's 8 years old, and all he wants to do is play with me. And he said to me, "Uncle James, why don't you just come home when you have enough?" And I sat there, I was talking to him, and I was like, that's actually a really good question. Why don't I just come home when I have enough? Like, why don't you just come home and play with us when you have enough? And it's kind of like that. It's what's enough? Have I achieved enough? Why can't I just be satisfied with simple things in life? You know what I mean? And to be honest, it's like a debate that I have in my head as I'm getting older and as I'm getting less and less selfish about that pursuit for whatever I'm pursuing. Excellence.
I had dinner last week with a mental coach, and he said that he doesn't think that Cristiano Ronaldo is really happy, because exactly of that what you said before, like there's never being satisfied. Okay, scored 50 goals this season, never being satisfied, want to score more. So I think that's a really hard point, right?
Yeah, for sure. And again, that's why it's on one side, it's what makes you successful. But on the other side, I sit there sometimes and I see people that are genuinely happy with their family and their kids living a simple life. And I think, that actually looks really nice. You know what I mean? And that's what you got to weigh up. And I guess you got to ask yourself a question: which direction do I want to go in life, and where am I going to find fulfillment? And the reality is, if you want to be the best and you want to be professional at something, you're probably not going to find balance. And am I going to be okay with that for the rest of my life? Because I'm going to sacrifice a lot along the way.
So you say it is not even possible to find this balance?
I think you can do your best, and you can try. If you have like a wheel of life and you have your different areas, I think you can try and find some balance. But I think if you want to be professional at something, from my experience, there's always going to be a bigger part of the wheel where that is, because otherwise you're not going to make it to the levels to that professional level of excellence. And I agree. I don't think I don't think Cristiano, people like that, I don't think they're ever satisfied or happy with where they are.
Let's go back again at the time in Netherlands, because I just realized that Louis van Gaal said to you that you're just not good enough in your first day when you were in Holland. Did you also have the feeling sometimes that you're just not good enough?
I think everyone, and again, it probably goes back to my upbringing, I always had a little bit of this inferiority thing, because, everyone always had a little bit more than us. And I think I always was driven by that a little bit. I was a little bit of, okay, I got to prove myself. I got to prove myself. I got to prove my worth. And I think I still have that inside of me, because that was just a part of my childhood. And that's not necessarily a healthy thing. And I think that's something you should try and, because that's about self-love and all that kind of stuff. But if someone told me I wasn't good enough, my mindset was, oh, I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to prove to you I am. And if I ever felt like I wasn't good enough, my mindset was, I'm going to work so hard that I'll prove it to myself. Yes. And so that was always, and that's not necessarily a healthy thing, but that was why I was successful to my own level, to whatever level I got to. That was why I was able to achieve, although I wasn't a superstar, I was able to achieve the things that I achieved in football for sure.
Mm-hmm. But for that, you need a great personality and you need to work on that. What I think is a big point in football and can be really tough is this comparison thing. I spoke with academy player a few days ago, and he said like he always have the feeling he sees players in his age and always think like, oh, he plays this level and I'm not in this level. Do you think that's a big point?
I think that's a big point in life. I actually heard something the other day. Life's like a gym. So you go to the gym and there's always going to be one guy to your right that's stronger than you and one guy to your left that's weaker than you. But shouldn't be focusing right. You shouldn't be focusing left. You should be focusing on you every day, getting better. But I think it's just human nature to compare, and it's definitely not a healthy thing. But that's how are you going to tell a 16-year-old to not compare yourself when I think adults have that problem? If you think about social media and all that kind of stuff, it's just like that's an endless battle of trying to find enough self-love and self-respect to not compare. But I think that's just a human knee-jerk reaction regardless of where you are and what stage you are at life.
I just wanted to mention social media. Just sometimes I see myself scrolling through social media and see people, I don't know, in Dubai or something, and have the feeling, fuck, this guy is my age and he's at this level. And I think that's just super, super dangerous, to be honest.
Absolutely. I think it's wasted energy. I think it's dangerous, but it's also human nature. I was thinking about it this morning as well. I went for a run and I saw some friends of mine doing something else. I was like, oh, that would have been fun. And then I can't think to myself, hang on a minute, I want to live a healthy lifestyle. I want to do this right now. This is a conscious decision. But it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters how secure you are in life and how secure you are in yourself and all that kind of stuff. I think there's always that little this is human nature to always compare and have that little bit. That's why social media is not necessarily always a healthy thing if you're not processing it all in a healthy way.
Right. And I think it is just not fair against yourself to compare yourself with others, because I think every story is different. There's no personality is the same than another personality. So I think every personality is unique. So a comparison is just useless in my opinion, but of course it's only in theory easy to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think comparison is useless, and I think there's also something special about being happy for other people as well. Instead of comparing, to say, okay, well, he's further than I am at this stage, and like awesome for him, he must have worked hard to get there. And I think that's also something that can bring you a lot as a human being as well, to be genuinely happy for other people and other people's success.
Can you manage that all the time?
I can. I'm someone who is happy for other people, absolutely.
Okay.
Of course, you have moments where you're probably not in a fantastic place in life. Like for right now, for me, I'm not 100% happy and satisfied with my life. So I think your internal reaction initially, sometimes in the first second when you see something or hear something, it might be different, but it's about kind of overriding that and saying, well, hang on a minute, he deserves it and I'm happy for him and that's awesome for them or her or whatever it is or whoever it is.
Why are you not 100% satisfied with your life at the moment? Because what you mentioned before, it is not your fault, right? It is just circumstances with the visa.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my fault, but I don't think, and I mean, I think a really dangerous thing in life is to shift the responsibility of your life to someone else. And I think that's kind of taking agency of your life and saying, okay, I'm responsible for my situation. And I think that's a really important part of also a healthy mindset in life and stuff like that. And of course I didn't get the visa, but in hindsight, I probably could have done I didn't get it because my A license for coaching, and I probably could have started that earlier. I could have looked into that earlier and I could have done more to be better prepared. So yeah, I'm definitely not satisfied, but I think it's like I don't want to shift that on responsibility onto anyone else. I accept that was my fault and that's on me. And now I want to prepare myself for the future. But yeah, just the phase of life, man.
Taking 100% responsibility of your life is a great point, because also when it comes to football, but also in the normal life, I have the feeling that it's really easy to say, oh, it's the coach's fault, for example, that I'm not playing. But I don't know, it's my wife's fault. It's really easy to say that, oh, it's the politics fault. But I think when you always see yourself and take 100% responsibility for your life, it is really easy. And then I also feel the power I have, because I feel like powerless when it's someone else's responsibility, right?
Absolutely. I think it's really empowering. And there's the psychological term agency. I don't know how do you say it in German. But agency is to take agency of your life, is to be able to impact your life and to be able to take responsibility and have a positive impact into I'm in control of what's going to go on. And of course there's always outside influences, but to have agency in life is really important. And I think if you're shifting responsibility everywhere, and you lose that feeling of agency and lose that feeling of I can't impact my life, I think that's a really dangerous place to be in. Whether that's in love, whether that's in football, whether that's just in life in general, I think it's really, really important to maintain a sense of agency for a healthy mindset. For sure.
What advice would you give your younger self, James?
It's funny, I was asked this recently. I would give my younger self the advice how do I put this? I would just say to relax and to enjoy the moments and to say that everything's going to be all right. Because I think as human beings, you're worried about the future or you're regretting the past, and you know that being present and being here and accepting, okay, this is the reality, that's okay. In the end, everything's going to be all right. And I would just probably say to my younger self, everything's going to be all right. Just enjoy the moments and be present as you can in every moment, regardless of, don't judge the moment as good or bad or whatever it is. Just be present, feel it and enjoy it. That's what I would give myself.
But isn't that the opposite of being never satisfied and what you mentioned before?
Yeah, for sure. But it's also, life goes quickly, life moves quickly. I've just retired, right? And it went by like that. And I think as a footballer, when I'm not playing, I'm stressed. I'm thinking my career's over. When I'm playing, I'm thinking I'm a superstar. When I make a mistake, I'm worried about the mistake I made. And I think just to go from moment to moment and not judge it and be present and feel it and enjoy it and be okay with it all, I think that's a really important part of life, an important part of a footballer's life. And if I think about me, like this moment, this is a good example. Like I said, I'm not necessarily satisfied with what's going on, but I try and remind myself every day, be present, be happy, enjoy it. If I'm going for a run, if I'm working out, if I'm doing a podcast, if I'm having a coffee by myself, just enjoy it. And I also, what I've been practicing lately is, okay, what would my 70-year-old self say if I asked him about that period of time in Vienna when I didn't have a job and I missed out on that job, and he would say to me, if you didn't make the most of it, he would give me a slap. You know what I mean? He'd say, enjoy it without responsibility, be present, enjoy everything you're doing right now, kind of thing. And I think talking to my 35-year-old self, talking to my 18-year-old self would be the same thing, would just be present, enjoy it, don't judge the moments.
Yeah.
Long, sorry, that was a bit long.
No, it's super interesting, really, because I think what you mentioned with being present is one of the hardest things nowadays, because you have so many things going around, I also realize sometimes I'm not even able to eat my food without looking at the phone, for example, just being present and enjoying my food or enjoying the coffee. And I think when it comes to the mental part of football, it's also a really, really important point, because when you're not able to be present on the pitch, and you're thinking about the mistake you made before, or you're thinking about, I don't know, what's going on in the future, what's going on in the next 10 minutes, it can be really, really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a famous rugby union player, Johnny Wilkinson. I don't know if you know him. He's one of the best of all time, won a World Cup with England and stuff. And he also has a really cool podcast. And that's his big thing, like being present in every moment and not judging the moments. And if you're present, you're clear and you can get into that flow state. If you talk about sports-wise, if I'm present on the field in every moment, I'm clear in my mind and I can see every moment as it is and clearly, and I can respond and react to every moment very clearly. And I think if you're able to live life like that, it can be a really beautiful thing. If you're able to perform like that, it can be a really beautiful thing. It's like when you watch Roger Federer play tennis at his best, you know, he's present in every moment. And I think he did a speech recently, it was all over the internet, where he talks about that. Like, he talks about, take every point as it is new. You know, don't if you made a mistake, if you won the previous point, if you lost the previous point, who cares? Just approach every point with a clear mindset and be present in every point, and that's no different in life. You know what I mean?
What would you like that your 80-year-old James Holland says to you once?
That's a tough question to answer, to be honest. It's hard because obviously when you retire, you start to think about how quick life goes by and everything like that. I would hope he would say, you did your best, you know, good job. Because that's all, you know, it sounds pessimistic, and I don't mean it in a pessimistic way, but there's like you know, you're born and you die, and I feel like everyone stresses out about so many things in between, but at the end of the day, you kind of just do your best. And in my opinion, the most important thing is the relationships you build, the impact you have on other people, and everyone worries about legacy or whatever, but it doesn't matter how important you are or how important you were. The reality is when you pass away one day, people are probably going to forget about you relatively quickly. You know, life goes on really, really quickly in football, in life in general. And I think you just got to do your best at life, and that's all you can really do. And I hope my 80-year-old self says to me, you know, you did your best, you did a good job, and keep doing your best. as kitschy and as corny and cheesy as it sounds, you know, that's there's a term in Stoicism called memento mori, and it's the idea of always holding, sounds really negative, but always holding death in your mind. And they say, and the idea is, or the principle is to always then, you know, death can go, well, the end can come at any moment, right? And so you've got to, it teaches you to appreciate every moment, to be in every moment, and to appreciate all the beautiful things in every moment. If you're washing the dishes or if you're playing football at the Bernabeu in front of 80,000 people, just to be and appreciate every moment.
Yes.
So
that's something I do every time when I go home to my family, for example, because the truth is that every hug can be the last hug, right?
Yeah,
every kiss can be the last kiss.
For sure.
We are so naive, thinking like it is not a gift enough to be on this planet, but we also think that it's normal to stay here for 8 years. It is not, right? Yeah. So I mean that's really, really deep.
That's a bit too deep for the podcast.
But I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. And when you think this way, it is easier for you to stay in the present, I think.
Absolutely. For sure, but it's not an easy thing to do as a human being, but you can do your best.
James, last question. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, something that I really want to do is have a family and that kind of thing. So I just hope I'm happy somewhere, doing my best with a family. And right now, I think I want to stay in football and all that kind of stuff. But where I'll be, it's hard to say. I'll kind of let life guide me a little bit.
Do you want to stay in Europe or?
Right now, I do. Yeah. I think. I'm hoping I have some cool opportunities that I'll be able to take up. So, I'd like to stay in Europe and explore the opportunities and explore the next phase of life.
I have always this phone call you mentioned before in my brain with your nephew. It was your nephew, right? Because I can imagine that it's really, really hard to be that far away from your family, and not only for 6 months or 1 year. It is like a long period of time right now, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned it just now. You try and stay present when you go home. You know, our mum was our whole world. She unfortunately passed away in 2017, and it was a bit of a shock. And as you get older, I think it's a natural thing, but also that moment then when you lose the most important thing, you know, the only constant you ever have in your life was my mum, or is your parents generally. And all of a sudden that was gone, and I'd spent the last 8 years over in Europe chasing my dreams selfishly. And in that moment, it's a bit of a reality check, and you know, I tried to take some lessons from it, and now as I've gotten towards the end of the career, that my career and that lesson and losing my mum and all that kind of stuff and seeing my sister have children, that fight between not being satisfied, chasing excellence, chasing your goals, and then saying, well, hang on a minute, what's important in life? Family, people in my life and all that kind of stuff. That's been a really prominent battle inside my mind. And my nephew, as children do, they're so wise, or quite often he shocked me when I was chatting to him. And, he said, well, when you have enough, why don't you just come home? And I was like, well, it's a really good question, it's something that triggers me because it's that battle I've been having for a really long time.
James, would you do it again, or do you sometimes have the feeling, oh, what if I just would have stayed in Australia? And
it's a tough question because obviously in hindsight I would have wanted to spend every moment I possibly could with my mum because she was my whole world. But I think if you put me in every situation I was in, I wouldn't make a different decision because I've always tried to make the best decision I could at the time based on the information I have in front of me. And more often than not, that decision, I would say my mum is my true north. Do you know what a true north is? Like your true north is that one thing that guides you, your morals, your principles, who you want to be as a person. I would say my mum is my kind of true north. And at every moment in life, I've tried to make decisions based on who I want to be and who I think she would be proud of, and she's always been my guide in that regard. So, although I would have loved to have spent more time with her, I probably wouldn't have made different decisions because I've tried to make those decisions based on the person I wanted to be and all that kind of stuff.
How was the time in 2017? It was, right?
Yeah.
For you playing football, and because the media, for example, they doesn't think about something like that,
No.
And how was the time for you to even stay focused on football? It must be super hard.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was my mum's birthday, coincidentally, so I literally just called her and I said, happy birthday. She was at a party and I said, look, I love you, enjoy your party, I'll call you later on and you can tell me all about your party. And then 3 hours later it happened. I got the phone call from the hospital, and obviously I was in Linz at the time playing for Lusk, and I was pulled over. I was on the freeway, pulled over, and obviously was going through all the emotions. Anyway, obviously I booked the flight back home and went through everything, funeral and planning everything and all that kind of stuff. And then 10 days later I was back at Lusk, and that's the reality as well of being a professional athlete. No one cares. And I remember about 1 or 2 weeks after that, I didn't react well in a situation, and the coach pulled me in. It was Oliver Klasner at the time, who I have a really good relationship with. But I'm a bit of an introvert in that regard, and I don't complain. I didn't say much, and he wasn't yelling at me, but he was telling me what I did wrong. And I remember just sitting there, blanking out, just thinking to myself, "Oh, give me a break, man! I'm struggling right now." And that was 100%. Like that's a tough lesson to learn, right? And that's what I said before as well. Like, life goes on, nobody waits for you. And although it's really, really important to go through the emotions and to deal with it all and to do all that, it's also the reality of life does go on, and nobody waits for you. And if you're professional sport, you're still expected to perform, you're still expected to train every day, you're still expected to be at your level. And it was a hard lesson, a really, really hard lesson. That was a really, really difficult period in my life, like absolutely the most difficult period in my life. But again, if you bring perspective into it, it teaches you a lot of cool lessons. It teaches you that football's actually not that important. Do your best, but it's not the most important thing. It's far from that. And it teaches you to appreciate the little things and not too much put too much pressure on 99% of the things you worry about in life and football and all that kind of stuff. So difficult, but something that everyone goes through.
Last question, I know, but what is your tip for not only football, also, for example, for me, to stay thankful and appreciate the little things in life, because sometimes it's not that easy.
No, absolutely. But it's a good question. I think just living consciously, like, I think that's a really important, just living, like, being really aware in every moment and living consciously and being present and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, I always talk about perspective and that tool, and I hold on to those moments and those lessons that I've lived, I've had, and whenever I feel like myself going in a different direction, I try and bring myself back, and that's what I mean by living consciously and being aware and being present in all the moments. But that's not necessarily a tip, but that's how I kind of deal with it all, and try and stay grateful and all that kind of stuff. I guess is that tool of perspective and taking the lessons of life that life gives you.
Oh, that's so interesting. I hope that so many people will listen to this podcast, to be honest. Not because it's our podcast, but I
hope they enjoy it.
I think also me, I learned so many things, so I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. What a journey. What a journey. And I think you can be just so proud of yourself, really. I mean, I cannot imagine me myself 5 years ago with 19 leaving my family and just go 10 of thousands kilometers away.
You could do
to
it.
work on my dream.
You could do it.
So huge respect. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And do me a favor and help a lot of people, a lot of young football players when it comes to the mental part of football.
Yeah. No. Well, look. One of my, I guess the why of what I want to do after football is to try and help people. So I'll do my best.
James, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.